Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics. In this video, I am super excited to bring you a massive South/Central American biotope that's over 16,000 gallons. I hope you enjoy the video. There's lots of lessons that can be learned when looking at this display tank. Appreciate you being here. So this is one of the coolest South American biotopes I have ever seen. And there are some fish in here that aren't necessarily from South America, but Central America too. This is from the Wonders of Wildlife National Museum and Aquarium, and I spent a lot of time sitting in front of this tank, and every time I did, I found something new, something really cool. So I guess the first thing is, this tank is massive. It is 16,000 gallons. That's right, 16,000 gallons. It is a huge tank. And I think there are so many lessons that we can learn from looking at this huge biotope, this massive aquarium, in regard to what we do in the home aquarium. And I think one of the things that stands out right away is a lot of these fish that we're looking at are often fish that aquarists try to keep in the average home aquarium. And one of the things I hope we will realize is how challenging that can be. So for instance, the peacock bass that you see in this tank, there are different species and not all of them get super large, but these are massive fish that are probably in the neighborhood of 20 to 24 inches, and they are very thick-bodied fish. They eat a lot, and to keep these in a home aquarium, you need a very, very large aquarium. And for most people, these are not well suited to be in a standard size fish tank. We're going to have a really hard time judging scale here because we're dealing with 16,000 gallons. And so the fish that we're seeing in these massive tanks, maybe they don't look as large as they normally would, but trust me, they were very, very large in person. I cannot recommend enough, if you are ever in the Branson, Missouri area, you need to check out this aquarium. There are so many cool tanks, and it really is something. We spent an entire day here. In fact, just in this one fish tank, one display, I sat in front of this tank at different times throughout the day for probably close to an hour, and every time I did, I noticed something new. All right, so we got the peacock bass. There are quite a few of them there. The other really cool thing that stands out, as you will see, there are arowana in this tank, some really, really pretty ones. And again, this is a fish that a lot of people like to try to keep in a home aquarium. And all I can say is these fish also get really super big, and they need a lot of space. So the fish that we're looking at here were probably somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 3 feet long. The other really interesting thing was we had some Midas cichlids, or some red devils in here. And I didn't notice it at first, but a lot of the red devils that you're going to see, they were all paired up, which was really interesting. And then as I look closer, what do you see? There are little tiny babies. And so all of these different red devil pairs had fry in the tank. It was super cool to see. Some really cool plecos, as you can see here as well. So the mix of fish was interesting. Here's a banded leperinus, which is an awesome fish. This fish was probably 12 inches easily, but it looked tiny in this large tank with these other large fish. So again, scale is going to be a little bit thrown off here because of the size of the tank. I thought they did an awesome job of the way that they aquascaped this tank. They had a mix of real and fake wood. And so a lot of the branches and things that you see, that's real wood, but most of the larger displays, that is all fake. I don't know exactly what it was made of, but it was really well done. And one of the things that not only stood out with this aquarium, but some of the other ones that we saw, almost all the other ones that we saw, was how well maintained these tanks are. Sometimes you'll go to a public aquarium and there'll be some really cool tanks, but they're not always kept up the nicest. This was cool. This was a peacock bass pair. They were kind of hanging out in this corner, and they wouldn't let any of the other fish get close to their particular area. And again, as you're looking at this, hopefully what you're noticing is a lot of these cichlids are paired up. Whether that's the peacock bass, whether that's the red devils, almost all of them are in pairs, and many of them have fry or they're protecting eggs, which I just thought was really interesting to look at. And this arowana might have been one of my favorite fish in the entire tank. And what I found so interesting about them in such a large tank, and it wasn't just the arowana, it was a lot of the fish, how calm they all were. They had their spot. Here we're looking at another red devil, and if you look very, very closely, you can see some extremely tiny fry. They're probably less than a few days old, and there is the female, and so they're kind of guarding this area. One of the things I noticed about the red devils is they were a little bit more beat up than the rest of the fish. So I don't know what fish in there, whether they're beating each other up or maybe it's the peacock bass, but they are definitely protecting an area. And you can see here a little tiny fry. Here's another group that's got tiny fry, but they were very prolific. I doubt most of the offspring are surviving in this tank just with all the predatory fish. As you can see, how about those teeth? Pretty awesome, but I don't think most of the fry in these tanks would survive, but it's still cool that they're comfortable enough. They're breeding. Here's a breeding pit. So these two, there weren't any fry that I could see, but they were clearly ready. Here's another pair of the peacock bass, and they'll probably try to breed at some point in the future. Again, I doubt most of the fry will survive. So another interesting thing we can see here, we've got the turtle, which is pretty cool. It's a nice little feature. When you've got a tank this size, you can do that. What I found interesting, in addition to the mix of fish that we see here, is also the way in which the tank was illuminated. The more I look at nature, the more I see some of these tanks that are on display. You can see here that we've got areas for these fish where there is less light. They can feel a little bit more comfortable. So even when we're dealing with a public display, this tank was not super bright. So there are lots of areas where there was more relaxed lighting where fish could go if they didn't want to be in direct light, which was pretty cool. And I think that's something, as we build aquariums at home, we should begin to think about our lighting. Often I think what happens in our home aquaria is we light them pretty extensively because we want to see the fish, and that's been traditionally what most people do. But I also think there should be areas within that ecosystem that is more dimly lit for fish to go so that they can feel comfortable and not be in bright artificial light all the time while the lights are on. I also really like the substrate that they have in this setup. It was a earth tone, kind of a darker brown substrate that was a mix of really fine gravel, and there were some larger pieces of gravel in there as well. And in some places it almost looked more sand-like, but it just had a very natural feel to it, as the entire aquarium did, which was pretty awesome. I love this top view where if you walk up the stairs, you can see what's going on. You know, a lot of the fish that are closer to the top, like the Arawan and some of these larger fish, it's just kind of cool to see them from a different perspective. And it is always interesting what you can learn when you're looking at these larger displays, what kinds of things you can incorporate into your own home aquaria. Again, I think the number one takeaway here is a lot of these fish that we think we want to keep in home aquaria are just far larger than most people can supply adequately. This last piece here, we actually went to the St. Louis Aquarium too on the way home, and they had their own kind of South Central American display, a little bit different. The rocks were a little bit larger, a little bit lighter. They had many of the same fish, but it was just kind of cool to see the different perspective here. You can see the relatively large red-tailed cat. Again, we've got the red devils that are kind of paired up and they're doing their thing. So the pacu, these are quite small right now. They're going to get considerably larger. I actually don't know what they're going to do with all these fish when they grow to full size, because this tank was not 16,000 gallons. It was smaller, and they have quite a few pacus. So this was the two pretty cool South American biotopes that I wanted to show you. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see other really cool South American biotopes, check out that video in the upper right hand corner. We went to Cleveland about a year or two ago, and that they had a really cool one as well. If you want to learn more about how to breed, we did a species profile on Midas cichlids. I'll put that in the lower right hand corner. Appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in the next one.